1 2 has been out for a few weeks now, and it has blown the minds of so many FNAF fans. I haven't played it myself because I'm a wuss when it comes to VR horror.
Exit.
But I have been watching many playthroughs on YouTube, and it looks like one of the best FNAF games yet. But we're not just talking about the amazing gameplay.
Oh, hi. Hello.
Help 1 and 2 delivered when it came to answering some burning questions about the lore. But in typical FNAF fashion, the answers it gave us weren't what anyone was expecting and derailed many a FNAF theory. Alright, I'm talking about one specific answer here, and if you haven't figured it out yet, it's the Princess Quest for gravestones. If you've been living under one of these rocks and this is all news to you, after one of the coolest moments in FNAF history, we get transported into Princess Quest itself and pick up the sword to fight some facehugger rabbit heads. Once those enemies have been defeated, we find ourselves in a graveyard with 6 numbered gravestones, much like in the first Princess Quest game. Except, unlike the first Princess Quest, each of these gravestones has a plush sitting next to it, wearing the mask of one of our favorite animatronics. I freaked out when I first saw this. It always bugged me in the first Princess Quest that we got the numbered gravestones with no indication of which was associated with which child. But it looked like Steelwool and Scott saw how much the fandom was debating the death order recently and decided to give us an answer. Except, the one thing I think pretty much everyone in the fandom agreed on was that Charlie was William's first kill. She might not have been the first death, but she was the first intentional victim of William Afton. It was one of the very few things the entire fandom treated as a sure thing. And apparently, we were wrong. According to Help 1 and 2, the order of William's first victims was Chica or Susie, Foxy or Fritz, Freddy or Gabriel, Bonnie or Jeremy, Golden Freddy or Cassidy, and then Charlie. She was killed after the missing children's incidents. Now, I've seen some people saying the grave order must mean something else, like the order that the children moved on. But numbered gravestones seems like a very straightforward way to me to communicate the order of deaths. Graves represent death. Numbers represent order. Therefore, numbered graves are the order of the deaths. And as for it being the order that the children move on, like, I understand the logic that Golden Freddy and the puppet move on last, but don't all the others move on around the same time? What's the significance of that order? I feel like this is one of the most direct pieces of lore that we've gotten in this entire franchise, and we can't choose to reject it just because it doesn't fit with our theories. So let's look at the contradicting evidence and see if we can make sense of it. Then we can take a look at what other questions this might answer. So yes, all I'm talking about today is the death order. I am working on another theory about what exactly the Mimic 1 glitch trap program is working towards throughout all of Security Breach and Help 1 and 2, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Let's start with the biggest hang-up I've seen everyone having with this. The insanity ending speech of FNAF 6.
It's only now that I understand the depth of the depravity of this creature, this monster that I unwillingly helped to create. As if what he had already done wasn't enough. He found a new way to desecrate, to humiliate, to destroy. As if the suffering wasn't enough, the loss of innocence, the loss of everything to so many people. Small souls trapped in prisons of my making, now set to new purpose, and used in ways I never thought imaginable. He lured them all back to a familiar place, back with familiar tricks. He brought them all together. Are they still aware? I hope not. It keeps me awake at night. I could make myself sleep, but not yet. Not until I undo what he has done and heal this wound. A wound first inflicted on me, but then one that I let bleed out to cause all of this.
A wound first inflicted on me, Henry says. So what, was he lying? He would definitely know whether his daughter was killed before or after 5 children went missing at his restaurant, so it's not like he can just be mistaken. But what if we're the ones who were mistaken? We all assumed that a wound first inflicted on me referred to William killing Charlie, but honestly, it's kind of a vague statement. So maybe we were wrong about what it meant. Right House has been tossing around an idea for a little while now that I was on the fence about. In FNAF 1, we see in one of the newspapers that the suspect has been charged. But judging by the ever-growing pile of corpses in this franchise, William was still walking around a free man. Meanwhile, Henry is MIA until FNAF 6. So Roy has suggested that Henry ended up taking the fall for the murders. I thought this was a fine idea, but without much evidence to back it up. But now I'm starting to think they might have been onto something. We're told in the Ultimate Guide that we can learn a lot about Henry and William's relationship from the books. And in said books, William has a love-hate relationship with his business partner. He idolizes him, but he's also furiously jealous of him. And it seems like a lot of what he does stems from a desire to either prove he's better than Henry, or bring him down to his level. I am very confident in saying that whatever twisted logic drove William to kill 5 kids at Freddy Fazbear's had something to do with his feelings towards Henry. Maybe he felt that Freddy's was more Henry's at this point, so he wanted to mess up the business for him. Or, going a step further, what if he always intended to frame Henry for the murders? Either way, I think that would qualify for a wound first inflicted on Henry. So what about the children possessing the animatronics then? It's Charlie, as the puppet, who gives gifts, gives life, and allows them all to come to life. How does that work if she dies after them? This one's quite simple, really, and I don't exactly get the hang up with it. The possessions don't occur until after Charlie dies, with the exception of Cassidy and Golden Freddy, of course, because she's just vengeful enough to come back herself. William kills the kids, stuffs their bodies into the animatronics, the security puppet is made to stop more death, but then he kills Charlie, she possesses the puppet, and then is able to help the other dead children possess their animatronics. That's why the dead kids are there from the start of the Give Gifts, Give Life minigame, instead of appearing one at a time as they join her in the afterlife. They were all already dead when the newly possessed puppet arrived, saw their bodies stuffed inside the animatronics, and then gave them life. I know some people think Charlie put their bodies in the animatronics, but that never made sense to me. Yes, in the minigame, the puppet gifts each of them an animatronic head, but that's just to illustrate that Charlie gave them life inside those animatronics. If she were stuffing them into the suits, I feel like that would be better illustrated by her bringing the child to the suits. The movie also went with William hiding the bodies in the animatronics, and while that's a different continuity, I think it just makes the most sense. So those are the main arguments against the grave order that I've seen, but if I'm missing something, let me know. For now though, let's move on to what we can learn from this, beyond just knowing the order these 6 died in. We also know, thanks to the code to retrieve the puppet plush, who was the last to die, that these deaths occurred in 1983. Now, this is in line with what a lot of people used to think. When FNAF 4 came out and the crying child was terrified of the animatronics, psychic friend Fredbear was telling him to remember what he saw, and the neighborhood kids were talking about bodies being hidden, we all assumed this was after the missing children's incidents, and that's what all this was alluding to. But then the book started preaching 1985, and we all decided that his son's death would be a good motivation for William to go on his killing spree. I held on to the 1983 MCI for longer than most, I think. After all, the books are in a different continuity, and there are more differences even beyond just the dates. But even I eventually jumped ship. Just a bit too soon, apparently, because it looks like Help 1 and 2 is implying that our initial theory was correct, and I have hair in my mouth. And sure, this changes up William's motivation, makes him that much more deranged, but a large part of me is immensely satisfied to go back to my original interpretation of FNAF 4, where "these are my friends" was literal because Crying Child's friends had been stuffed into animatronics, and the rumors that the animatronics came to life at night were based on fact. Is 1983 a little crowded? Sure, but it still works. We know from FNAF 1 newspapers that the MCI was in June. I imagine Charlie was shortly after that. And then I think the Crying Child died in October due to the Help Wanted 1 DLC having a lot of FNAF 4 theming around the Fall Fest of '83. And then Elizabeth had to have died sometime after that. And honestly, 1983 fits a lot better with the newspaper clippings that we get in FNAF 1 and FNAF 2. In FNAF 1, an article talks about Freddy's closing by year's end after a long struggle to stay in business. And then in FNAF 2, it's referred to as a vintage pizzeria given new life. If the MCI took place in 1985, and then the FNAF 2 location opened in 1987, That leaves only 2 years for a long struggle, Freddy's closing, and then enough time passing for Fazbear Entertainment to think that they can revive the vintage pizzeria. With the murders taking place in 1983, though, that gives us a lot more time to work with and seems a lot more reasonable. Instead, maybe the long struggle to stay open ended in 1985, and then a couple years passed, and then Fazbear Entertainment decided to try to revive the brand. And I just think that fits so much better. Now, I'm still working on my early timeline, but something that's been bugging me for a little while now is that the Ultimate Guide calls out that the sprites of the dead children in the FNAF 2 minigames are all different, implying that there are 4 different instances. Take Cake to the Children is obviously Charlie, Give Gifts, Give Life is the MCI, Save Them are the murders we hear about in FNAF 2, so what about Foxy Go Go Go? It seems so random and doesn't fit with any of the deaths that we know about. So this got me thinking that maybe it's showing 5 more kids who were killed in 1985. There's not a lot of basis for it, but the kids do seem to be in a party room, kind of like the 1985 murders in Into the Pit. And maybe Foxy was blamed for those murders, so that's why he was never repaired. I don't know, I'm not sold on this, I just had the thought while writing this theory and wanted to get your thoughts on it. Before I end this video, I think there's something else that this new information clears up. Midnight Motorist. It has always made the most sense to me for Orange Guy to be Afton, Couch Potato to be Michael, and the Runaway Kid to be Crying Child. But the Later That Night label in the files seem to imply that it takes place after Charlie's death, due to both minigames taking place during a rainy night. Sure, it could mean later any nights. But the fact that we have 2 examples in FNAF 6 of a night where someone is driving a purple car in the rain, it seems like it has to be referring to the events of the Scaredy Puppet minigame. So why was that a problem? Because of the animatronic footprints outside the window. If Charlie was the first murder, the only possessed animatronic is the puppets, and she's not leaving those footprints. Additionally, if Crying Child died before Charlie, as I'd previously thought, then he obviously couldn't be the runaway. But the purple car equaled William, and a gray guy watching TV was a perfect match for Michael. And yes, it is perfectly realistic for him to pick on his brother, but also defend him from others. The only problem was that it didn't fit with the original death order. But now, knowing that Charlie died after the MCI, it can actually work. We know Charlie didn't have to give life to Golden Freddy, Cassidy came back all on her own. And when I first watched the FNAF movie, this scene of Golden Freddy appearing at the kids' house and leading them to Freddy's immediately made me think of Midnight Motorist. And it works because there's only one set of prints and Golden Freddy teleports. So he could have appeared outside of Crying Child's window and led him to Fredbear's where he sees his friend Charlie dead, and maybe because Fredbear was who led him there, he thinks he's the one who did it, and he becomes afraid of the animatronic, and that fear only grows when his father starts experimenting on him with hallucinogenic gas as punishment for running away. What about Junior's? Maybe it's Fredbear's and William isn't allowed in there because it's an active crime scene. Or maybe it is just a bar and Scott just wanted us to know that William's a drunk. The thing I'm still stuck on though is that stupid mound of dirt. The best I've got is that Cassidy is buried there because William didn't want to stuff her in a springlock suit that people might look inside. But since she was vengeful, she still manifests as Golden Freddy for some reason, and that's why he teleports rather than walks. And that would also fit with Andrew, who was the vengeful spirit in the Frights books, being buried outside Freddy's. I don't know, it kind of works, but I also don't really get the manifestation as Golden Freddy if she was buried outside of Fredbear's. The other most likely option is that it's Miss Safton that's buried out there. But I would love to hear your thoughts on it, or on anything that I talked about today. All this is to say, I guess Chica was right when she said that she was the first, and I would like to formally apologize for gaslighting her saying she was wrong. Stay hyper and keep theorizing, friends.